Wherever you are in the world, good day, good people, good day, and welcome to WOW, which only well live television show where I am your host, SherVonne Grose, marriage and family therapist, inspirational coach, and motivational speaker. You know what we do, guys. On Wednesdays, it's a wonderful, wonderful Wednesday indeed. And you know what we do on Wednesdays. On Wednesdays, we come to WOW. And by WOW, I mean to wish only well all across the world. I am so excited, guys, about my very special guest who is backstage ready to come out to get the conversation started. So before she comes out, you know how we do. I have to do her justice by properly introducing her. So let me tell you guys all about the very special guest who is here in the studio with me today. She is none other than the awesome, the fabulous Barb Nangle. Okay. Barb Nangle is a boundaries coach and the founder and CEO of Higher Power Coaching and Consulting, LLC, and host of the podcast Fragmented to Whole Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. At the age of 52, after decades of therapy and tons of self help work in a variety of areas, Barb found herself in 12-step recovery. She's been in two such fellowships since then and has changed deeply and profoundly as a result. As a former addict and people pleasing rescuer, she empowers people to live their lives on purpose by coaching them to form healthy boundaries in their personal and professional lives. That definitely sounds like a wow winning only woman. And I am so glad that she is here with us tonight. So, without further ado, guys, let's welcome to the studio Barb Nangle. Hello, Barb.
Right. Hi, SherVonne.
How
Thank
are
you so
you?
much for having me. I am wonderful. I'm beaming. Can you tell? I'm really excited
Yes,
to be here.
I am so
Yeah,
happy to have you here too,
excellent.
as well. Well, welcome to the Why Wish Only Well television show. Oh, there's just so much to just talk about, Barb. Even just
Hmm.
reading this, I mean, you have had a lot that
Hmm.
has transpired within
Hmm.
your lifetime. So
Hmm.
listen, we're gonna just hop right into conversation,
Okay.
right? So
All
let's
right.
talk about your journey and how you got to where you are. And I know that there are so many phases. I just read
Hmm.
things and I'm so amazed by
Hmm.
a lot of stuff that you post.
Hmm.
One picture in particular I saw where you had posted what you looked like prior to
Hmm.
becoming a healthier version of yourself. And this
Hmm.
is what WOW is all about, empowering people, right? Inspiring and motivating people to become the best version
Hmm.
of themselves.
Right.
So
Yeah.
listen, let's talk about that.
Okay. All right. So you want me to just dive right in?
Dive right in.
Okay. So I started therapy probably at about age 15 and went almost continuously. When I got into recovery, I was 52, I was still in therapy. So that's 37 years, not straight therapy, but very close. Um, I was introduced to self help, the health self help genre when I was about 24 and just could not get enough of it. I read a gajillion self help books. I was always going to retreats and doing workshops and workbooks. I've taken every personality assessment you can, except for the Enneagram. I've never done that one. I've done every other one of them. And just always trying to find out more about myself, trying to grow, trying to learn. And I would say, really, the only thing I knew for certain that was not working in my life was my romantic relationships. I had a string of dysfunctional relationships behind me.
Mhm.
And the way that I talked about it was almost like I would say like, "Oh, I have a bad picker." I happen to be a heterosexual woman, so the people that I pick are men, and it was like I have a bad boyfriend picker, and I talked about it like it was like a lever that I had that was broken. Meanwhile, I'm the picker, right? And I didn't say anything. I was acknowledging that I picked them poorly, but I couldn't acknowledge that I stayed with them as well. And then when I look back now on my relationships, I can see that I blamed them for all the bad stuff in the relationship, but I took credit for all the good stuff in the relationship. I wasn't conscious of that at the time, but now that I have been in recovery, I would say the gift that recovery gave me the most was the ability to really see myself. So in 12-step recovery, we call that finding out our part in things. Like, what was it that I had been doing in my life that had been either creating chaos or exacerbating the chaos around me? I really had no idea. So none of my therapists ever said to me, you grew up in a dysfunctional family and you've suffered from relational trauma. None of them said to me, you're codependent. None of them said to me, you have a substance abuse problem. None of them said to me, you're a compulsive overeater. None of this, none of that ever came out. And so the story of how I got into recovery is that I signed up to work on a project serving homeless people for my church. And right before the project started, this homeless guy named Dan started coming to my church, and we became very friendly. And I was like, oh, divine intervention. Like, God brought me a homeless person to befriend, to know as a human, so
Mhm.
that when I'm serving homeless people, they're not like the homeless to me.
Right.
They're human beings, right?
Exactly.
So Dan and I became friendly, and then one day, after knowing him for a couple months, I invited him to stay in my home during a snowstorm, and he did. And then he stayed another time, and then another time. And then 4 months later, he was practically living at my house, and I felt trapped.
Mhm.
Now, he wasn't actively drinking when I met him, but apparently he was using other substances. I didn't know this at the time. And I think now he may also have been a narcissist, and he effed with my head like you would not believe. And I remember this one moment in particular where I was on the floor
Mhm.
in my basement sobbing. And I remember saying to him, I feel like I'm having a flashback. And I meant like an emotional flashback, but he
Right.
thought I meant a drug flashback. I never did any drugs that would cause me to have that. But he went into like helping gear very quickly, which was actually helpful because he's like, get in touch with your senses, which is, what needs to happen. And I think now that I know what I know, that was probably a trauma response, a trauma reaction that I had.
Mhm.
So around that time, I was in therapy talking to my therapist about him. And in mid sentence, I stopped and I went, oh my God, do you think I need to go to Al Anon? And she was like, yes. So for those people who don't know about 12-step recovery or about Al-Anon, I'm going to pause for a moment and talk a little bit about what that is. So the mother 12-step recovery program is Alcoholics Anonymous. Most people have probably heard of that.
Mhm.
Maybe they know somebody who's in it. It was created in 1939 by co-founders Bill W. and Dr. Bob. And since then, a whole bunch of other 12-step recovery programs have come along and really enabled people to stop not only acting out in their addiction, but to really straighten up and clean up their lives. We call it cleaning up the wreckage of the past. So I'm starting to lose my train. Oh, so Al Anon is actually the program for the loved ones of
Mhm.
people who
Mhm.
are alcoholics. Because the thing is, when you have an alcoholic or an addict in your life, the things that you do sort of by nature that you feel like are going to be helpful to them are actually not helpful, and in fact often make the problem worse.
Okay. All
So
right.
12-step recovery program Al-Anon developed, and I knew about it. And so my therapist said yes. So I'll tell you, SherVonne, I don't know what I put in Google, but I was looking for Al-Anon, and I came across this word codependent.
Mm.
I was like, what? Now, as I said, I read a gazillion self-help books, been in therapy forever, workshops, workbooks, very introspective person, never heard this word. And I was like, how is this possible? So I remember saying to my therapist, listen, I don't feel like I got hit in the head with a baseball with this news that I'm codependent. I feel like I got hit in the head with a planet. Because what else don't I know about myself? How is it possible that at the age of 52, as a seeker for all these years, therapy, no, I'd never heard of this. And she said, Barb, I think for you, codependence is a unifying concept. It pulls together a whole bunch of things that you know about yourself. You just didn't understand that they were related. And I was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Because initially I thought she was saying it kind of to make me feel better because I was so shocked. But I realized over time that it was really true. So I got into recovery for codependence. And very quickly, I remember saying to someone who may very well have been Dan, now that I think about it, I said, I think I need to be reparented. But I thought I made that term up. I didn't know that that was a thing. And then very soon after, I went to go to Cape Cod to visit some dear friends, one of whom had been in Alcoholics Anonymous or AA for many years. And she
Mhm.
always raved about it and just talked about how much her life was turned around, not just from being sober, but really like doing that cleaning up the wreckage of the past. So when I was visiting her, I was telling her about this codependence recovery. And she said, let's see if we can find a meeting and I'll take you. And I didn't know at the time because I was so new in recovery. It's very customary when you meet somebody in recovery or you find out that you have a friend in recovery to like go to meetings with each other. It's just a fellowship that
Mhm.
um, it's just a thing. It's like a fellowship, right? So she couldn't find that fellowship, but she found another one that didn't sound like it fit me. But I said, I'll go for you. And we walk in and they say, we reparent ourselves. And I was like, what? And then they read the list of items that help you know if you qualify for the program. And I was like, oh my God. Now, my friend's name is Heidi. She tells me I sobbed the whole meeting. I don't remember that. But I came home to New Haven, Connecticut, where I live, and I started going to that fellowship. So I went to the codependence one and this other program, which is actually it is for dysfunctional families and it's a trauma recovery program where you reparent yourself. I did the
Mhm.
two of those for 1 year. And I ended up letting go of the codependence program because I just wasn't seeing or feeling the kind of recovery that I was really getting in the other program. And then right around that time, it's another divine intervention. One of the women I was doing the 12 steps with in that program started talking about her thinking and behavior around food. And I was aghast. And it wasn't at what she was doing or thinking that I was aghast. It was that she was talking about it. And really that she also thought like me. I was like, wait, other people think like that?
Mhm.
So we call it 12 stepping someone into another program. And the reason we call it that is because part of step 12 says we carry the message of recovery to those who still suffer. That's why it's called 12 stepping. So she wasn't saying you need to go to this program. She was just talking about what she'd been doing and how she got into this program and how much relief she got and how helpful it was. So, long story short, I ended up going with her. I walk in and I hear a man who says, I'm down over 185 pounds and I've been this way for 30 years. And I was like, I'm listening because I had worked for Weight Watchers years before. And the statistics at Weight Watchers are that 95% of people gain their weight back. And I had known the only people I'd ever known that had lost over 100 pounds. All of them had had the surgery. 9 of the 10 of them had
Mhm.
lost weight back. And here I was over 100 pounds overweight. I don't know exactly because I stopped weighing myself. The highest weight that I ever saw on the scale was 247. But I know that I weighed more than that, but I really don't know how much more than that. My goal weight is 147. I'm at 146 right now, and I picked 147 specifically because I knew that that would be 100 pounds, and that felt like a really big accomplishment.
Yes. Oh my
So
God.
I got into that program, and now I'm still in those two programs. So I have been at my goal weight for over 4 years. I have been, we call it abstinent in that program. It's much like being sober in Alcoholics
Right.
Anonymous.
Mhm.
Um, and I've been in the other program for 7 years. And what we aim for in that program is emotional sobriety. And I would say, like for me, the biggest thing that program helped me heal was my codependence. And so for those people who don't really understand what codependence is, I don't blame you because I didn't either. It is really a reliance of that which is outside of yourself. Often you care more what other people think of you and you seek other people's validation.
Yes.
You bend over backwards for other people. You're super accommodating. You're a people pleaser, rescuer, fixer, that sort of thing. And usually, what I've come to understand in all my years of recovery and learning about this stuff is that it's often a result of trauma.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so it's a trauma response, and but it's also a pattern that can be unlearned, and I am living proof of that. And one of the reasons that I became a boundaries coach is that learning how to form healthy boundaries was an absolute game changer in my life and in my recovery. I think of having developing healthy boundaries as an incredible gift from my recovery, but
Mhm.
it's also a very important tool for me to maintain my recovery. Now, I had started just sort of generally life coaching people, and I knew that I could help people change their deeply entrenched patterns because, as I was telling you before, SherVonne, I declared bankruptcy in 1999 when my student loans came due, and by 2008, I bought a home. So I've transformed my life
Oh my
financially.
gosh. Yeah.
I'm down over 100 pounds after lugging around that extra weight for over 20 years. I wasn't obese as a child, but I started the battle with the weight in my early 20s, and it was
Mhm.
like 5 pounds in my 20s, and then it was more like 80 to 100 pounds starting in my 30s.
Yeah.
I've healed these codependent patterns. My mental health is so much better. I'm in the healthiest relationship. I mean, the only healthy relationship I've ever been in my entire life. So I've literally transformed my life in so many different areas. So when I started, it was just sort of like general life coaching, but I honed in on becoming a boundaries coach for a few reasons. One, every single client I ever worked with needed help with boundaries. Two,
Hmm.
I am super good at helping people form healthy boundaries. I don't know what it is. I do know. I think it's that I know what it feels like in
Like,
my
yeah. The experience.
have
Yeah.
boundaries. I know what it feels like to feel like safe and secure in my healthy boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And I know how to articulate that. So, people need it. I'm good at it. And I also really needed a niche for my business. And it just made sense for me,
Yeah.
to be a boundaries coach. And what's happened as the more I coach about boundaries, the more I understand about them
Mm-hmm.
and the more I see them permeating every area of my life.
Yeah.
And one of the amazing things that's sort of hard to explain to people, especially if they don't have healthy boundaries, is so healthy boundaries are you decide how you want to live your life.
Oh, I
You live
love it.
life that way, and then you communicate those standards to other people. That's the basics of what
That's
boundaries are.
so
So it's
let me interrupt you for 1 second. As you go, I'm gonna take myself down for one quick second. I'm gonna let you wow the listeners with this because
okay.
this is very good. And then I'm gonna come back in, okay? Because I
Okay, sounds good. Okay,
okay,
sounds good.
continue. Okay.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, I love a captive audience, as I told Siobhan, so I'm good. I told her she might have to rein me in at the end because I like to talk so much. So learning how to have healthy boundaries is partly about learning what do I really like and what do I not like. So, for example, I grew up in a family where I was told rock and roll is real music, and I bought that hook, line, and sinker. I remember being 8 years old on the playground at school, and other girls were looking at the little magazines with Donny Osmond and the Partridge Family and Michael Jackson, and me looking down my nose at these girls at 8 because that wasn't real music. Like, that's how deeply I embodied that message from my family. Well, it turns out now that I'm in recovery, I realize I like dance music, I like pop music, I like indie rock and all that sort of thing. But I didn't know that because I never allowed myself to even listen to those other kinds of. I didn't just not listen to them. I judged those kinds of music. So I learned my own identity.
Mm-hmm.
I tried taking singing lessons because I love to sing. And I realized, you know what? I mean, I took singing lessons in my first couple years in recovery, and I was like, you know what? I don't like singing lessons. I like singing. I don't like scales and I don't like exercises. I like singing, but I didn't know that. So boundaries, you like when you're in the process of learning healthy boundaries, in order to set limits with people, you have to know what your limits are, and you have to learn. So
Good
when I
point.
coach my clients, they say, "Well, I don't know what I prefer." I'm like, "Well, that's part of what we're going to do together. Is you're going to figure out who you are, And the way I think of it is I figure out like the shape of Barb, the boundary of Barb, so that I can then articulate that to other people. And the other thing that's really important in learning how to have healthy boundaries is learning how to directly communicate with people instead of beating around the bush, instead of
Yes.
implying, instead of hoping or wishing or trying to read people's minds or wishing that they'd read your mind. You must directly communicate with people. And so I teach people how to do that. But of course, you can't do it if you don't really know who you are. And what I learned was that it's one of my friends in recovery said this, and this really helped me so much. People don't put fences around property they don't value.
Wow.
So you're not going to put a boundary around yourself if you don't value yourself.
Right.
But the way that boundaries work is that it's like this, it has to start somewhere. So what I experienced was I set a boundary. Ooh, that felt really good. So I feel a little bit better about myself. And then it becomes easier to set the next boundary. And then I feel better. And then it's easier to set the next boundary and I feel better. So starting, like for me personally, I think the boundaries that had the greatest impact are what I call boundaries of self-containment. These are the things that you need to contain,
Uh-huh.
hold on to, or stop doing. So some of those things that I need to stop doing are things that just put me in harm's way and don't affect other people. For example, I might have given away personal and private information to people and made myself unnecessarily vulnerable before
Yeah.
recovery. I don't do that anymore. I
Mhm.
have boundaries of self containment now. There are other boundaries of self containment. There are things that I need to hold on or stop doing or contain that create chaos around me. So, of course, they affect me, but they also affect other people. And gossip is one of those. So, I was shocked to learn in recovery that I was a gossip. I had no idea that what that was what I was doing, which is kind of amazing because here's what I was doing. I was complaining about my boss behind her back for 19 years. Now that's pretty much the definition of gossip, but I just didn't understand that. And but here's what I learned because I grew up in this. Because I'm in this recovery program that deals
Mhm.
with family dysfunction. I learned what happened to me was I grew up in a family that engaged in indirect communication. You
Mhm.
never went to the person you had a problem with. You always talked to everybody around them. So this
Yes.
was a communication pattern laid down in my family before I was born. So I had no hope of growing up in that family and knowing how to directly communicate or even believing that it was a thing. I actually remember being upset with people that communicated directly and I thought they were rude and jerks, right? So of course I gossiped. So the what happened to me was I grew up in a family that engaged in indirect communication and the result was that I gossiped. So as soon as I learned that, of course I had to stop
Mhm.
gossiping.
Mhm.
So and I could go on about that because taking down that we call those defects of the character in recovery. Taking down that one defect of character was almost like it had this domino effect and took down a whole bunch of other ones for me. And I had to work very hard to do it. So I've contained that behavior. And so
Mhm.
I would say I still there are a number of things that are like slippery slopes for me that I'm like, I don't know, is this gossip, is that gossip? Because there are certain times during which it's important to talk about other people. And I remember doing research when I was trying to learn to stop gossiping, like, well, what is gossip? Why do we do it? How do we stop? And one of the things I learned was that it may not be gossip if you are solution oriented. I was like, okay, got it. And so then what I started doing was gossiping, but throwing in some solution. And then I realized, okay, this is not
Then
what
you're
it's called
not.
for,
Okay.
right? This is not what it's called for. I've got to really, so that helped me to realize, like, oh my God, this gossip feels so good. Why does it feel so good? So I started talking to other people in recovery and I was like, tell me like why does gossip feel so good to me? Like I hate that it feels so good, but it feels so good.
Right.
And one person said, well, you get to feel better than other people. And I was like, oh, okay. And then
Yes.
somebody else said, you get to continue blaming other people for your
Yeah.
problems. I was like,
Right.
ding, 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 ding. So what I found when I stopped gossiping about my boss was that my resentment against her went down by like 95%. And let me tell you something. I loved this woman too. She irritated the hell out of me, but I also really loved her.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I stopped gossiping, my resentment went way, way down because I realized that I was giving a small thing a big shadow,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so I was experiencing the difficulty, but then I was reliving it over and over and over again. So boundaries of self-containment are some of the most important boundaries, that I've learned. So when you're learning how to set boundaries, it's often helpful to start with things that really just are with you, that you're not setting boundaries with other people, because you're going to have a lot of feelings come up when you set boundaries because it's new behavior, and especially when you're setting boundaries with other people. Because if you don't have healthy boundaries, you're what's called enmeshed. You
Yes.
are emotionally enmeshed with other people, and it's like you feel their feelings. You
Mm-hmm.
think from their perspective. You don't think about your own behavior and what you're doing, and it's about you. You are always thinking about how is this going to affect other people. And
Mm-hmm.
it's nice to be considerate of other people. Of course it is. But it is not okay and it is not healthy when all you're thinking about is other people and never thinking about yourself.
Yeah.
If you're only thinking, how does my behavior affect other people, and not thinking, how does my behavior affect me, that's a problem because you're actually living this your own life. You're not really actually living their life. And so the process of learning how to have healthy boundaries, it's imperative to learn to keep the focus on yourself. So I do a lot of work with my clients on learning to keep the focus on yourself. And
Wow.
so one of the ways that we do that is when we're in a situation that a decision is required, we ask ourselves, what do I really want here? What do I really want to do? Or what is the outcome that I want? I
Mm-hmm.
was not used to doing that. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, what does the situation require? What do the people need? What does he need? What does she need? I was never thinking about what I wanted. So I had to start purposely doing that. Another way to keep the focus on yourself is to look at a situation and try to think, well, what could I have done differently? Like what in recovery we call that my part in things. I alluded to that earlier. So what could I have done differently, or what can I do now to repair it? Or if this situation arises again, what do I want to do differently then?
Mm-hmm.
Another way that we keep the focus on ourselves is to mind our own business. I was around giving unsolicited advice all the time. You know
Yes.
what I the most advice about, SherVonne? Relationships. With the string of dysfunctional relationships behind me. I used to say to people, listen, like when they would complain about the relationship, I'd say, you know what? Listen, you're 50% of that relationship. So if it's not going well, then you're 50% responsible for the solution. Now, I could say that to other people. Meanwhile, I couldn't say that about my own relationships. Remember how
Yeah.
I said before how I was like, oh, I'm responsible for all the good stuff and they're
Yes.
responsible for all the
It's
bad stuff.
great.
And so minding your own business. It's if somebody wants your advice, they will ask you for it.
Yes.
Or if you really feel like you can be helpful to someone, get consent from that person. Say
That's
something like, I have an idea that might be helpful. Would you like to hear it? And if they say no, then you go, okay, then you don't give it to them.
and let it be
And
like that. We have less than 2 minutes, so I want to make
oh
sure
no,
you. Yes, time
oh I
goes
thought we
by.
had an hour. Oh my goodness.
No, 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 no. So, but I want to make sure though that you tell them because people we're getting comments over here. I'm looking like as it feeding over to Facebook, right? So people are saying, "Speak on that." Hi, beautiful lady. So we're getting
Oh goody.
getting great engagement from. But listen, I want you to use this time to tell them how they can connect with you and how they can even maybe get in to one of your sessions. And we got to bring you
Okay.
back because we got to finish this because I'm all like,
Right.
I'm gonna
All
catch
right.
myself. I was all like this.
Okay. So my favorite place to hang out on social media is on Instagram. I'm at Higher Power Coaching. My website is higherpowercc.com. I have all kinds of free resources on boundaries there. So there's a drop down menu that says my issue is. Actually, you can also get there by going to betterboundariescom with Barb, betterboundarieswithbarb.com.
Okay.
And then I also am the host of the podcast Fragmented to Whole Life Lessons from 12 Step Recovery. You can find that on any podcast outlet. It's also on my website under resources. And then there's links to every single podcast outlet that's there. I do private and group coaching on boundaries. I don't have a group going on right now. I have a waiting list for my next one. It's probably going to start in the fall. That's 8 weeks group coaching. And then I also do private one-on-one coaching for boundaries. That's a 12-week program where you get tons and tons of one-on-one coaching with me. I basically hold your hand through the whole process.
Okay.
And then I also have a membership community that's called Secure, Loved, and Brave. We do 3 group coaching calls per month, and I have a huge treasure trove of personal growth and development resources. All that stuff's on my website.
Good deal. All right, guys, make sure you check out Barb of High Power Coaching, and we will definitely have Barb back for part 2 because we're already out of time. I've got to look at expanding my time, guys, because these conversations. So that is all for this session of Wow Wish Only Well. We will say goodbye to you guys. Have a good rest
Bye,
of your
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Okay, Barb, you stay right